If you ever get an offer to crew a boat near the Black Gulf, say no to it no matter how much they pay you. It's not worth what waits past the fog. We don't fish by the island. We feed it. And the worst part? The rules aren't for your safety. They're to keep it from waking up. The ad was short and blunt. Deckhand wanted. No experience needed. Offshore pay. Mustn't fear the sea. That last line stuck with me more than it should have. That I'd been sleeping in my car for nearly a week, running from a past I didn't care to face, and starving enough to chew the seat foam. When I saw the flyer posted to the back wall of the greasy diner in Port Greaves, I snatched it down with the desperation of a man who had nothing left at a payphone call, a gruff voice, and 1 meeting later, I was hired. The man who picked me up said his name was Captain Morrow. He smelled like sea brine, diesel, and cigarettes that had gone stale years ago. His skin looked like it had been carved from driftwood. "You'll be on the Calypso Gray," he told me without looking. "We leave tonight. No backing out after that." I should have run the moment he handed me the laminated rule sheet. Anchor the rules. Taped to the door of my bunk, never speak of the island. If the foghorn sounds 3 times in a row, get below deck immediately. Don't look at the water between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. Not even a glance. If a catch is already dead before you pull it up, toss it back. Don't touch it. We fish around the island, never towards it. If you hear singing from the water, cover your ears and hum until it stops. Salt your boots and leave an offering at the bow before every trip. If the sea goes silent, pray it doesn't notice you. Never ask what happened to the last deckhand. That I thought it was some kind of hazing thing. Maritime superstition, something to scare greenhorns. But something about the way the rules were typed, water-stained, and nailed into the door, it didn't feel like a joke that we set out that night. Just me, Captain Morrow, a wiry older man named Elias who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade, and a mute Samoan cook named Taika who always stared a second too long. For men, 1 boat, in 1 direction, into the sea, into the fog, toward Blackthorn Isle. The island didn't appear on any GPS. It wasn't listed on maps either, but Captain Morrow always knew when we were near it. The water would get darker, almost black, with strange white barnacle growths floating like tumors across the surface. I asked Elias once why no one else fished this area. He just stared at me and muttered, "They remember what happened last time." That first night, I did as told. Salted my boots, laid a silver coin and 3 sardines at the bow. The others did it too, no exceptions. Morrow watched with a grim nod, like we were pledging to something far older than the sea. The trawling began just before midnight. The sea hissed like it didn't want us there at by 2 a.m. We had nets filled with writhing, eel-like creatures with glassy eyes and pulsing gills. Nothing I'd ever seen at the market. Nothing I'd want to eat. Locals call 'em whisper fish, Elias said, dumping one into the cooler. They don't sell, but we don't catch 'em to sell. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. He wasn't out at 2:58 a.m. I stood by the railing for a smoke break. That's when I heard it. The first sirens called. It didn't sound like a song, not at first. It was more like a vibration, deep and ancient. It wasn't coming from the speakers, and it sure as hell wasn't the wind. It was in my bones, tugging at the soft animal inside me. Then came the voice, soft, female, like honey pouring through. Broken teeth. It sang to me in a language I didn't know, but my feet started to move toward the edge without my permission. Hey. Elias yanked me back, slapped my face twice hard enough to sting. "Don't you ever listen near the rails," he snarled. That's how Dawson went under. My head cleared just as I saw it. Something in the waves, smiling with too many teeth. It disappeared when Elias threw salt at the water. That I didn't sleep that night. Back in my bunk, I pulled the blanket over my head and watched the lamp swing from the ceiling hook. The boat groaned like it was being pulled somewhere it didn't want to go. At 3:12 a.m., the foghorn blared. 3 times in a row. I froze. Rule number 2. If the foghorn sounds 3 times in a row, get below deck immediately. But I was already below deck. And the rest of the crew? Nowhere in sight. I stepped out into the hall. Taika's door was wide open, swinging gently. The kitchen light flickered. Something dripped, slow, wet, like meat slapping metal. "Captain," I whispered. The boat rocked violently. I slammed against the wall. Somewhere above deck, something massive slid across the surface with a scraping screech, like claws on steel. The sea outside was no longer black. It was our indeed at dawn. Everything was back to normal. No one would answer my questions. Captain Morrow gave me a once-over and said, "You lasted the first night. That's more than most." We hauled in the nets. Except this time, there was something else in the net. Not fish. Not eels. A jawbone. Human. With symbols carved into the teeth. One tooth missing, snapped off and stained black. Morrow took it, wrapped it in kelp, and whispered to it before tossing it overboard. I said nothing. I was learning. Fast. The days blurred. Fish, salt, fog, and rules. I learned them all. Obeyed. Them all. But rule #4. The one about dead catches? That one, I broke. It was an accident. I was pulling in the net, late at night, when I saw it. A bloated fish, gray and stiff, clearly dead for days. Instinctively, I reached in. The moment my fingers brushed it, I felt a sting, like a jellyfish, but deeper, under my skin. My arm went numb. The veins in my wrist turned black. I collapsed on the deck, convulsing. Captain Morrow didn't speak. He carved a symbol into my forearm with a fishhook, packed it with salt, and told me, "Pray it doesn't follow your scent." That night, I dreamed of the island. Not from the water, from inside it, I saw tunnels of bone, eyes in the stone walls, and at the center, something vast and asleep, its chest rising every 10 seconds. Its breath smelled like rotted ships and drowned souls, and it knew my name. In the following days, the island got closer. Not because we sailed toward it, but because it came to us. The fog thickened. Shapes moved across the surface, not boats. Once, a bell rang out in the middle of the night. Morrow ran topside screaming, "Don't answer it." I stayed down. I obeyed. Elias didn't. He was gone by morning. Just his boots remained, filled with seawater, toes pointed inward. On the 7th day, we finally docked, not at port, but at a floating platform made of driftwood and bone. There were others there, old fishermen with skin like kelp and eyes. Like salt-rimmed glass, they took the fish, whispered in guttural tongues, paid Morrow in jars of ash and silver teeth. Before we left, one of them gave me a message scratched on dried skin. "You hear it now, don't you? Once the song enters your skull, you'll never be able to sleep dry again." As we sailed back toward Port Greaves, Captain Morrow sat beside me and finally spoke the truth. "You weren't hired to fish," he said, lighting a damp cigarette. "You were hired to feed it. Each haul, each offering, each broken rule. It's watching." "Why me?" I asked. He looked at me like I was the dumbest man alive. "You answered the ad, didn't you? They told me the island doesn't move. But it does. It drifts through fog, searching for blood that's been promised. I broke the rules. I touched what I shouldn't. And now, something follows us back to shore. New moon. The fog followed us back. We left the floating platform of bone and driftwood 3 days ago, but the fog didn't let go. It hung behind us like a hungry mouth, stretching across the water in a curtain of gray, dragging the scent of dead fish, damp rope, and something far worse. Something sweet and sickly, like rotten honey. The kind of scent you only catch when a body's been sitting in water too long. Captain Morrow didn't say a word. He just kept the Calypso Gray heading west by northwest, a path he followed not by GPS, but by instinct, like a dog circling back to a buried bone. Taika, the mute cook, hadn't come out of the galley in over 24 hours. When I peeked inside to check on him, I saw he'd nailed fishing hooks in the shape of a spiral to the kitchen wall. Beneath it, in fish blood, he'd written, "No moon. No light. No God." I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. Anchor Elias's boots are still on the deck. He disappeared on day 5. Just like the others, I suppose, his boots stayed behind, waterlogged and full. But now, on day 9, something new has started to happen. Every morning at 4 a.m., the boots moved. I've seen it with my own eyes. They don't walk, they drag. A slow inching motion toward the captain's quarters. And every morning, Captain Morrow finds them outside his door, steaming like they'd just come up from the sea floor. He doesn't touch them. He just spits salt over his shoulder and goes back to the helm. When I asked him why he doesn't throw them overboard, he muttered, "Can't throw back what's already been claimed." New moon, no moon, tonight weary sailing under a pitch-black sky. No moon, no stars, just water and fog. According to Morrow, this is the night it stirs. He gave me new instructions. Add 3 drops of your own blood to the salt before you rub it into your boots. If you don't, the boat becomes unclean. It sounded like madness. Until I forgot to do it, and the Calypso Gray stopped moving. Literally, like something had clutched it from beneath. The engine whined. The propeller spun, but we didn't move an inch. Then came the knock, not from above. From beneath, a slow, rhythmic knock. 1, 2, 3. I leaned over the side and saw nothing, until the water began to ripple in a perfect circle around us. And from the deep, a shape floated up, humanoid, pale as bone, lips torn back in a smile far too wide that it didn't blink. It didn't swim. It stared, and then it mouthed something I still don't understand. One broke the oath. One fed it. Lies. Scroll, a new rule appears the next morning. The rules posted on my bunk changed. I didn't write it. No one said anything. But it was there, in red ink, the rule number 10. If the blood in your boots dries before dawn, it will know you're faking. Bell, the bell tower beneath the sea around 2:15 a.m. on the second no-moon night. We heard it again. That deep, rusted bell sound coming from the SEIT wasn't church-like. It was metallic, hollow, and angry. Taika had locked himself in the galley and was banging pots together, humming so violently it sounded like sobbing. Captain Morrow just lit a cigar and said, "She's calling home." I asked what that meant. Morrow explained in a voice so low it made my skin crawl. There's a tower beneath Blackthorn Isle, older than bones. Some say it's the spine of the thing beneath us. When it rings, it's waking up. I asked what it was. He just said, "You'll know when it's hungry." Fish the catch that shouldn't breathe. 2 nights later, we pulled in a strange net. The sea had been churning all day, like something massive was circling below. That we thought the nets were empty, until we heard breathing. I, in the middle of the net, tangled in slime and seaweed, was a boy, naked, no older than 10, eyes jet black, pale blue veins webbing across his body. His chest rose and fell like a normal kid, but there was no heartbeat. Taika vomited. I took a step back. The boy opened his eyes, looked directly at me, and whispered, "Where's Elias?" Captain Morrow didn't hesitate. He shoved the net back into the sea. We all watched the boy sink, smiling the whole way down. Then Morrow turned to me. "That wasn't a boy. That was bait." Merman, the ones in the fog. By day 15, the island was no longer visible, but the fog carried shapes. Silhouettes of people walked across the top of the water, some missing limbs, some crawling, some dragging nets of skulls behind them. One night, I saw my mother standing at the edge of the deck. She died 6 years ago, but she was there, wet, smiling, calling my name in her old nurse's uniform. I ran to the rail. Then I remembered rule number 3. Don't look at the water between 3 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. It was 3:06. Too late. Her face melted. Her body cracked backwards, mouth stretching inhumanly wide. I screamed. Taika pulled me back just in time. My left eye hasn't stopped bleeding since. Anchor the return to the island on day 20. Morrow announced we were returning to the island. "We didn't finish the offering," he said, "and it's following us now." The water around the boat had changed. No fish, no birds, no waves, just silence. Blackthorn Isle rose from the sea like a rotting tooth, jagged, sharp, covered in the carcasses of whales and seabirds. The rocks were red, not with rust, but blood. Morrow dropped anchor and told me I was going ashore with him. He handed me a harpoon soaked in oil, a pouch of salt, and something I still can't explain, a small box made of human fingernails. "If it asks you a question," he said, "don't answer. Just give it the box and walk away." The altar of teeth. We hiked across the island in dead silence. Every step I took made my chest heavier, like the air itself didn't want me. Breathing it. We found the altar in a shallow cave. Bones were piled high, arranged in a spiral. In the center, a hole. Endless. Breathing. Morrow dropped a handful of the strange fish into the hole and began to chant in a language that sounded like drowning. Then it spoke. Not from the hole. Not from the cave. From inside my mind. "You broke the rules. You fed us dead blood. You touched the bait. Now you belong." I screamed. Morrow shoved the box into my hands and pushed me toward the pit. "Offer it, or it takes your name." I threw the box into the hole and collapsed. The cave fell silent. The fog outside cleared slightly, and the thing retreated. Final rule, carved into my skin. When we got back to the boat, I collapsed in my bunk and passed out. When I woke up, there was blood on the sheets. Someone, or something, had carved a message into my chest while I slept. Not deep, just enough to scar. Rule number 11. If you survive the return, you must not speak of the island on land, or it will send something to fetch you. We dock tomorrow. I want to believe this is over, but Taika won't stop whispering. Moro won't sleep, and the water behind the boat, it's starting to boil. Something's still following us, and I don't think it's ever letting go. We made it back to shore, but something followed us. The sea no longer sleeps, and now it calls to me in my dreams. Salt doesn't work anymore. The rules are changing, and the only way to survive is to break them all. Ship, we returned to port. But we didn't come alone. The Calypso Grey docked at Port Greaves in the dead of night. No fanfare. No questions. The harbor master didn't even check our paperwork. He just took one look at Captain Morrow, turned pale, and backed away. I should have felt relieved. I should have dropped to my knees and kissed the ground. But I couldn't stop shaking, because something was wrong. The fog didn't stay at it followed us in. Thick, rolling mist drifted from the docks up through the alleyways, past shuttered bait shops and abandoned seafood stalls. The lamps flickered like they were underwater. Seagulls hung frozen in the sky, wings twitching, mid-glide. Elias's boots were still on deck, now filled with sand instead of seawater. Salt, the salt no longer works. I went to the diner where I first saw the flyer. The one that got me into this mess. It was boarded up. Rusted chains on the door. A fishhook nailed through the help wanted sign. That's when I realized. Port Greaves was empty, not abandoned. Emptied, and no footsteps. No cars. Just fog and silence. I ran back to the docks, but the boat was gone. Only a single item remained on the pier. A rusted harpoon wrapped in bloody fishing line, and something worse. Captain Morrow's coat. Inside the pocket was a final note. If you see the tide come in when the moon isn't out, run. It's not the ocean anymore. And just like that, I was alone. Waterwave, the water is closer every day. I hold up in the last motel still open. The Gutted Gull, out near the marshes. Room 6. No other guests. The front desk clerk never blinked. He handed me the key and muttered, "You'll hear her walking the shore. Don't answer if she knocks." I didn't ask, but that night, as I lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, I heard footsteps on the balcony, soft, wet, heavy. They didn't stop outside the other rooms. They stopped at my knock. Knock. Knocked. I covered my ears, started, humming like Taika used to. The knocking turned to scratching. Then I heard my own voice, calling from the other side of the door. "Open up. It's me. I just want to talk." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then came a whisper through the keyhole. "Salt can't save you anymore." Safety pin, new rules etched in flesh. The next morning, I found a mirror in the bathroom with words scratched into the glass. Rule number 12. Do not sleep near open water. Rule number 13. If your reflection lags, cut the light immediately. Rule number 14. If the sea begins whispering your name, you have 3 days. I didn't write them, but someone or something did. My reflection blinked a second too late. I smashed the mirror and slept in the tub with the curtain drawn and the tap running hot. That night, I dreamt of Morrow again, drowning over and over, screaming in a language I still didn't understand. But this time, I saw what was pulling him down. It had my face, a stranger with wet footprints. On the second day, I went to the chapel by the cliffs, hoping someone was still around. Inside, candles had melted down to bones. The pews were overturned. Salt circles scrawled on the altar, but I wasn't alone. A man sat in the front row, hooded, trembling, soaked from head to toe. He didn't look up when I entered. "Too late now," he said, voice hoarse. "You took something that belongs to the deep." I asked him what he meant. He just laughed and muttered, "You fed it, but not enough." Before I could press him, he handed me something wrapped in seaweed, a tongue still twitching. "This is Taika's," he said. "It's saying when it shouldn't." Then he collapsed and bled out at my feet, his skin turning to scales before my eyes. Fishing pole, the island calls. From inland, I left the chapel running. My boots made wet sucking sounds on pavement that had never been near the ocean. I looked down. The road was soaked. Seaweed lined the curb. The town had shifted. It was like blackthorn. I was leaking into Port Greaves, one crack at a time. Street signs were now carved coral. Birds flew upside down. Fish swam through the fog as if it were water that I followed the sound of the tide. Except it wasn't coming from the shore, it was coming from underneath me. Hold the drain in the motel back in my room at the Gutted Gull, I watched water pour from the sink without turning the tap. I checked the tub. Full. Black water. Smelled like the whisper fish from the nets. I leaned over and saw something staring back. Not my face. Morrow. Eyes wide. Mouth stuffed with hooks. He mouthed the words, "Feed it again. Or become it." I slammed the door shut, shoved a towel under the crack, and locked the mini fridge for no good reason. Then I grabbed the harpoon and prepared to leave. New moon, the ritual of the returning cache map appeared overnight. Burned into the wooden floorboards of my room. It showed the harbor, the island, and a new location, the drowning stone. Written beneath it, one must return. One must drown. The blood will stop the fog, for a time. I followed the map. It led me to a sinkhole in the forest behind the cliffs, filled with ocean water despite being 30 miles inland. And in the center floated Elias's boots. I knew what I had to do. I stabbed my palm with a hook, let blood drip into the water, and whispered, "This is my offering." The water swallowed the blood. The fog above lifted just slightly. Then I heard a baby crying beneath the surface. I ran. Telephone receiver, the final warning. I returned to town to find every payphone ringing, every single one. The exact same tone, one after the other, like dominoes falling in. Sound. I picked up the nearest one. No dial tone. No static, just one sentence. "If you speak of this, we will teach the land to drown." Click. Then all the phones went dead. The fog rolled in again, and the sea came up through the gutters. The grave of the boat. I found the Calypso gray again. Not at sea, not docked, buried at half sunken in the sand on the outskirts of Port Greaves, like a beached whale, rotting, bloated, leaking oil and seawater. Inside, Elias's hat, Tyka's rosary, Captain Morrow's lungs, still breathing, pinned to the wheel. Was the last rule, this time burned into the helm. Rule number 15. No one leaves unless another takes your place. The boat groaned. The sand around it shifted like something beneath it was waiting for me to choose. But I didn't. Not yet. Nazar Amulet, the woman in white, the final night. I saw her again. She walked up from the tide, pale, soaked, smiling. The same figure I'd seen on the balcony. She called my name, but this time, I answered, and she froze. That broke the rules. The fog screeched. The sky cracked open like glass. The ocean rose, and I finally understood. The rules weren't to protect us from the sea. They were to protect the sea from us, and I had just broken the last seal. The fog never left. It lives in me now. The sea has rules, but I shattered them. I saw what sleeps beneath Blackthorn Isle, and it saw me back. Now it wants a body, mine. New moon, the town is gone. The island is here. I awoke to the sound of waves crashing against my motel wall. The Gutted Gull was no longer a motel. It was an island shack, swaying in salt wind. Sand filled the hallways. Seaweed snaked around the light fixtures. My bed had become a fishing cot, damp and infested with barnacles. Port Greaves was no more. The town was submerged. Buildings like tombstones jutting from the water, birds circling. Upside down, windows glowing with faint red light from underneath the waves. Blackthorn Isle had returned. Not as a destination, but as a reality. It had replaced everything else. And I was the only one left. They never wanted a fisherman. They wanted a vessel. It hit me all at once. The flyer at the diner. The job with no experience. The rules, the fog, the offering. It wasn't random. I wasn't hired to fish. I was chosen. Pulled in. Fed to the ritual one step at a time. I was the replacement, Captain Morrow, Elias, Tyka. They weren't just crew. They were the last cycle. Each of them had broken a rule. Each had paid a price. And now it was my turn to take the helm. Trident Emblem, the boat, returned without moving that night. Under a black sky where the stars blinked like dying eyes, the Calypso Gray sat waiting for me to know. Harbor. No ropes. Just floating in the shallows like a pet waiting for its master. The wood was warped. The nets dragged through the water with a will of their own. And in the cabin mirror, I no longer had a reflection. Just her, the woman in white. The one who knocked. The one who smiled. Only this time, she moved when I moved. "Take the helm," she whispered. "Or take the pit. Hold the mouth beneath the island." They never called it a god. never named it. That gave it power. They only referred to it as the mouth beneath. It didn't eat flesh. It ate memory, names, souls. Every time a rule was broken, it opened further, closer to waking, closer to replacing the sea with itself. That I didn't believe any of it. Until I sailed into the center of Blackthorn Isle. The heart, where the water turned red, where the sky breathed, where birds flew backward and screamed like infants, and where I saw it. The mouth, not teeth, not flesh, just a hole in the world, sucking reality inward like a drain. Ships, souls, towns, even time. I saw centuries of wreckage spiraling through its current. Moro's face, Elias's boots, a mirror showing me aging 100 years in 1 second. The only way to survive was to give it what it wanted. Fire the book of fish skin in the cabin. I found a book bound in dry, scaly skin. The pages were thin as onion peels, written in blood and bone dust ink. Each chapter was a rule. Each rule came with a story of how it was broken and what price was paid. One man looked at the water at 3:10 a.m. He was erased from every memory. Even his mother forgot she had a son. One woman ignored the singing. Her skin peeled into fish scales, and she danced into the ocean, blind and smiling. One boy answered the knock. He became the next voice knocking. The last page was blank until I blinked. Then a new line appeared. Rule number 16. If you reach the end, you must write the next one. Ferry the crew of drowned names as I approached. The altar at the center of the island. The fog parted. Figures stood on the shore. Moro, Elias, Taika, even the boy we'd pulled from the net. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were black glass, and their mouths never moved. They pointed behind me. I turned. The sea had risen, not as water, but as bodies. Thousands, writhing, whispering, merging into a wave. Each of them once a rule breaker. Each one now, part of the mouth, and it wanted me next. Skull the final offering. I had one choice left. Offer myself. Or offer someone else in my place. That's how the cycle continues. Moro offered Elias. Elias offered Taika, but I had no one. Until I heard the knock. 3 slow raps at the back of the hull. I opened the hatch and saw my reflection waiting there, soaked in seawater, holding a flyer. Deckhand wanted. No experience needed. Mustn't fear the sea. I understood then. The flyer would go back to land. Someone else would find it. Someone desperate. Someone lost. And when they took the job, I'd be free. Candle the final rule. I wrote it on the last page of the book, using a fishbone and my own blood. Rule number 17. If you read this, it's already too late. You're the next name. The sea remembers. The mouth is hungry. And you just broke the first rule by speaking of the island. Waterwave. I still fish, but not for food. I now sit at the helm of the Calypso Gray. My hands steer. My eyes scan the horizon. But I am no longer alive in the way you think. I exist, half man, half ritual, bound by hooks, driven by tides, held together by salt and promises broken. Every night, we sail into the fog, casting nets, waiting for the next poor soul who doesn't believe in rules, waiting for you. Asterisk. I never left the sea, even after the boat vanished. Even after Blackthorn, I'll slip back beneath the waves like a dead god, drawing the sky with it. Even after the last rule was written in my own skin, the ocean didn't let me go. It simply rewrote me. Fog. There's no such thing as shore. Anymore. The mainland doesn't exist the way you think it does. I walked back into Port Greaves once. What was left of it? The shells of buildings, the warped streetlights bent like melted spoons, the windows whispering my name. There were no people. Just reflections, moving on their own. I watched myself walk past a bakery, wave at no one, sit on a bench that wasn't there. My body was back at the harbor, but my image, it had been cut away, like a skin left hanging in a mirror. That's what the sea does. When you break its rules. It doesn't kill you. It splits you. One version remains in the waking world, going through the motions. The other is kept, preserved, fed to the thing beneath. And when someone breaks the rules again, it stitches you back in. Wrong. Ferry the ghost crew. Sometimes, when the fog is thin and the tide leans just right, I see them. My crew. Not Moro. Not Elias. Not Taika. Me. Versions of me. Older, younger, with scars I don't recognize and tattoos I never had. They walk the beach or row boats of bone across dead waves. Some scream, others sing. All of them broken. I think these are the me's from other stories. Other timelines. Other rules that were broken. That's the final secret the sea never tells you. There's more than one island. More than one mouth. And more than one of me. Salt the salt has turned sour. The rules were meant to protect us. But they weren't made by us. They were carved by something older. Something that doesn't speak, but hums. Something that doesn't feed, but remembers. When you salt your boots, you're not warding off evil. You're paying rent. When you avoid the 3 a.m. water, you're not protecting yourself. You're respecting an agreement. Every boat that sets out to fish is just an offering tray. And every man on it is bait. The ocean never wanted fished, it wanted names. And it took mine long ago. Now I answer to nothing. Waning crescent moon, the ritual that can't be stopped. If you try to end it, burn the boat, sank the books, cut the skin from my arms where the rules were written, wrote new rules, nothing works. The sea always rewrites them, because the rules aren't instructions, that they're a contract, signed in blood, bound in fog, reinforced by the screams of every poor soul who broke just one dot. And the final clause? One must tell the story. One must carry the warning. One must call the next. That's my job now. The boat still moves. The fog still calls. The nets still go down. And every time someone listens to my story, every time someone gets curious, the contract is renewed. Spiral shell, you're already on the boat. Still reading, aren't you? You've already heard the rules. You've already seen what happens when they're broken. That you've already walked down to the dock. Maybe not physically, not yet, but in your dreams. You've already seen the island. You wake up wet. You taste salt. You hear gulls when none are around. You find seaweed in your shoes. You swear the wind smells like dead fish, even though you live inland. That's how it starts. That's how it always starts. The name on the hull has changed. I went back to the Calypso Gray one last time, but it wasn't called that anymore. The paint had peeled, revealing something beneath. Older letters, carved into the wood, deep and angry. The listeners do. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. It means the story doesn't stop with me. It keeps going. With you, you read. You listened. You followed along. You didn't skip the rules. You didn't turn away when the sea got dark. You didn't stop when it whispered. Now the boat knows your name. And soon, the island will too. Final rule. Final warning. If you've read this far, you're already in it. And that means I owe you one last rule. Not the kind you write in books. The kind you whisper before the tide rises. Rule number 18. If you tell someone else about the island, it'll go after them instead. If you keep the secret, it'll drag you down. Choose. That's the last deal it gives you. Break the cycle by damning another soul. Or honor the silence. And let the fog take you alone. Fishing pole. So what will you do? Will you click away and pretend this was fiction? Will you tell your friends and smile nervously as they laugh? Will you scroll, hoping the unease goes away? You already know the answer. You'll start to hear the waves. You'll check the mirror twice. You'll dream of a harpoon rusted with your own blood. And you'll wake up one night, exactly at 3:10 a.m., to a knock on your door. 3 slow raps. Knock, knock, knock. You'll remember rule number 1. Never speak of the island. But by then, it'll be too late. Gloves, my job is done. Yours just began. I've steered the boat long enough. I've whispered the story across tides and teeth. I've cast my net into the hearts of strangers. And now, I've finally caught someone. Yo.